I think it's time to bring some class back into rock crawling RCs. Hello everybody, welcome back to Waffles RC. Today we are doing a no fabrication build. All bolt-on, all aftermarket parts from Amazon, as you would have guessed. They're all relatively cheap parts. Didn't go super crazy with it, trying to keep this thing very basic. Very excited to put the body on it, but let me just show you all real quick all the parts that are laid out here on the table that you need to basically assemble your own RC. So all of this right here, that is to build the frame of an RC. All of this is based on the SCX-10-2. We have the frame rails, cross members, skid plate, link arms, axles, transmission, transfer case. And it's the same style that I use all the time, but now this time you get to see what it is actually made for in this frame. Got coilovers, sliders, battery tray, body posts, receiver, motor. Steering servo is supposed to be here sometime today, so you need that too, which I forgot to order, so that's why it will be here later. Let me unpackage all this stuff, lay it out on the table so you can see it all. Then we're going to get started putting it together. So like I said last week, this video is for the people that leave in the comments that they wish that they could fabricate or they don't have the fabricating skills. This is to show you that you don't need to fabricate to make a very custom one-off RC. Yes, it is based on another model of RC using all aftermarket parts, but you can put this all together with no welder, basic tools, and you have a fun RC. And then you choose the body that you want. That's the key with this, is you can put whatever body you want on it. And you'll see the one that I chose, and it's not what you think it is. Okay, so that is everything laid out to make an RC car frame. Everything right here, once assembled, I didn't feel like taking that out of the box, by the way. Not yet. That right there is a running RC car. So I'll move all this again and we'll get started with from the very beginning of how I personally know how to put this particular RC together. Okay, so from experience of doing this, because that black Toyota is essentially what we're doing right now. So that one, I learned all of this. So hopefully my ideas will help a few of you out with putting these together. So with these frame rails, it'll come with a bag full of hardware. That's the other good thing about all of these parts, is that it comes with the hardware for it. You do have to kind of guess which ones go where, but you'll figure it out as you go. So grab one-sided frame rail, doesn't matter which side, any side honestly. There's going to be holes that line up with the skid plate, so you're going to match all those up and do just one side. Ask me how I know. Also, while you do this for the center skid plate, you're going to run sliders. Comes with these. It comes with these plates as well. Put these on while you're bolting up this skid plate as well, because the bolts have to go through it. So save yourself some time and just slap them on right now as you're putting this whole part together. I also have a front bumper mount, and this is where the steering servo is going to go when it shows up. That's going to go obviously up in the front. I'm going to mount the skid plate, front bumper. I'm going to mount those to just one frame rail right now. Then we'll move on to the next step. So here we are so far. Got the slider mounted because it uses the same mounting bolts for the skid plate. We have the front bumper mounted and servo mount, whatever you want to call it. So I do it like this for a very specific reason. I'm only doing half of it because if you bolt this up together right now, there's a few other pieces that have to go inside of the frame rails, and then you have to unbolt them all. So I'm trying to save you the time and the hassle of having to put it all together, get excited, and then you have to put, like, say, the motor in, where you have to take one frame rail off. Now this is the rear cross member piece. To put this on, it uses the same mounting hardware as the rear shock towers. So grab your rear shock tower for the side of the frame that you have chosen. Put it about where you want it to be, depending on which wheelbase you're going to run. This one's going to be a 313 millimeter wheelbase. There are a bunch of holes where you can run for a 313 or a 324, I believe. I don't know which one of these holes is the right one, so I'm going to guess and see what happens. So there is the rear shock tower plus the rear cross member. So now, once all of this is put together with the other frame rail, it starts to look like an RC car chassis. So the reason why I leave it apart like this, for this particular front mount motor setup, it uses these bars that, if you're a long time watcher, you've seen these bars and you've seen me throw them away. With this one, we can't throw them away because we need them to mount the motor, because we're not making tabs. It's all bolt together. So these, there's a hole drilled in one end of it. There's not a hole drilled in that end of it. Or, you get what I'm saying. I'm messing up my words. Where there's a hole drilled, you want that facing backwards, and it is arced just like the frame. See, on the frame right here, there are two holes, which this bolts right up to it. The other thing that also bolts up to this is the front shock tower. See, it all kind of goes together. So I'm trying to, like I said, I'm trying to save you the trouble of having to put it all together, then take it apart, then put it all together, back and forth. I'm going to put this on with the front shock tower, and then, oh wait, actually, before I put that on, you have to put the actual motor mount on it, which threads in, has a countersunk hole. It's got a tab. I don't know if you can see that. It's got a tab, and that sits just like that. So screw this together before you put it in the frame. I almost forgot that. Okay, so as you see, front shock tower is on. It is curved as well. It goes with the curve of the frame. You'll see, put the whole motor mount together. Put these ears on that go inside the frame rail before you bolt it up to the frame, because I don't know if you can see it. That screw right there is very hard to get to when it's in the frame. So put it together just like that. And now, I believe, I'm hoping, now it is time to where we can put this frame rail on, and we have ourselves a little chassis. There we are. It is all as a frame, all together. Now, I'd be lying if I said that all these holes were drilled absolutely perfectly. They're not. It takes a little bit of manipulating, but you can get them together. So, next steps from here, in my opinion at least, the next steps would be to mount the transmission and the transfer case. But first, gotta grease and Loctite that thing up, and then we'll put it in here. Transmission and the transfer case in. Now you may notice that I have turned this around, which I had to do with the entire skid plate because there's only mounts on one side of it. That's how these transfer cases mount, and the transmission's on like the 3-gear axial style transmission. I had to turn it around because I was trying to get more speed out of it by putting the input drive shaft to the center post right here so that it would go faster. But it did not. The drive shaft was too long, wouldn't allow the motor to sit on the motor mounts. So now you see, based on all the other RCs that I've made, what all these brackets are for is to hold this front mount transmission and transfer case just like this. Also, I forgot to note, on your shock towers, there's a track bar mount. If you get the ones that have a track bar mount built into them, it goes on if you imagine this as a real car, the driver's side, because the track bar mount on the axle is on the passenger side. And also align your body post holes, because that's what these are. These are body post mount holes, front and rear. Make sure that they line up with each other, so that way when you put a body on, body posts aren't all in random weird places. So that is where we're at with this. So now we have to go through these: Loctite, grease, all that fun stuff. You've seen me do it a number of times. I haven't done a time lapse of the transmission and the transfer case, so I've now done that. Main thing to take away from this is to take every single bolt out of it, take the portal covers off, put grease in there. Take the center diff housing out, put grease in there. And every single bolt that you can see other than, shock and control arm bolts, take them out, put Loctite. So I'll get these done and you'll see it right now. And just like that, they are all done. It is a very annoying process, greasing and Loctiting these things, but it is a necessary process, so buckle down and get it done. Now that we got these done, let's get to the control arms. Also, my steering servo just showed up, so now I'm going to determine whether I want to keep it on the axle or if it has to go on the frame. That's all going to depend on where the axle is located in relation to where the motor is, because if this comes up and hits the motor, then this won't be usable. So these particular control arms are for a 313 millimeter wheelbase. There's 2 shorts, 4 mediums, and 2 longs. Where those go, I don't know as of right now, but I'll let you know once I figure out where each one of these go inside of here to mount the axles onto it. So the orientation was the shortest 2 links are the rear upper links. The medium links, 2 of them are the rear lower. On the front, the other 2 medium links are the front upper if you're doing a triangulated 4-link like this. And the 2 long ones are the front lowers, whether you're doing triangulated or a track bar system. That's the orientation of those. Let's get the coilovers on it and see how ridiculously tall it is, because, well, I like tall, long shocks. And there we are. As per usual, I have my 110 millimeter shocks on it. Because I like lots of travel. No matter what anybody says, you will not change my mind. So now that we got axles hung, springs on there, let's get the motor in and then check to see if the steering servo is going to hit on this, because if it does, when it bottoms out, then there's no point in doing that, and we'll switch over to do a track bar setup. Oh, and full disclosure, I did have to get my hardware kit. The coilovers did not come with any mounts, or I don't know if you can see them, but there are little spacers in there to space them off of the shock towers. Did not come with it. You can get a little spacer kit pretty cheap on Amazon. It has various different sizes, and then a hardware kit. This is all just M3 hardware. Get that pretty cheap as well. It's a good thing to have whether you're putting one together or you just lose a bolt when you're out crawling. It's good to have a spare kit, but I just wanted full disclosure on extra parts. So in the description, I'm going to have all these parts. I'll also make sure that I put the hardware and the little plastic spacers on that list as well, so you can see that. So I went with another Hobbywing Quick Run Fusion SE. This one is a 2-in-1 1200 kV. This was the cheapest 2-in-1 that I was able to find, so I have this in 4Runner and in the hauler, different KVs for those, but it's actually been pretty good, reliable motor. Haven't fully tested them underwater like the Spectrum motors, but trying to do all this as affordable for you guys. Not like, I'm not going to do a Castle Creations or anything like that. I can't afford that stuff. So this is the budget RC channel, as I'm liking to call it. So I'm going to try to keep it that way. And yes, I understand that budget is relative. It all depends on how much money you have, how much money you're able to spend on these. So work within your own budget. If you have a higher budget and you can afford the expensive stuff, feel free. Absolutely feel free. I'm sure that they're good. It's been proven that they're good. So, not with any of my stuff, but other people have proven that they are good motors and ESCs. I just don't think I'll ever be able to afford one. There you go. There's your motor. So, with these motors in this particular transmission, the forward transmission goes in here like this. But you got to make sure that you set the gear that comes with the transmission on this. 1, use Loctite. 2, don't put it too far out. You may have to take it apart a couple of times. But don't put it too far out because then it'll rub on the transmission housing and it'll just make a lot of racket. So you may have to play with it a couple of times after you get the whole thing powered up and running. If it makes a lot of noise, then you got to take the motor back off, move that gear back just a little bit, and it'll work perfectly fine. So I put the steering servo on the axle for 2 reasons. 1, because this axle came with a steering servo mount for on the axle, which does perform a lot better than a track bar setup. But like I said, I was worried about clearance between this and the motor, and well, it does hit it, but only going straight full down. Now, if you articulate, that's bottomed out, that's stretched out, and it's not touching. So that's my biggest concern. I'm not going to be jumping this thing, so not overly worried about that. And the main reason why it's down here, even though it hits the motor, is because these mounts right here, the motor would definitely be in the way of the servo. So just basically pick the lesser of 2 evils. So we'll see how it turns out for me. And remember, don't put your steering servo horn on until you get this thing all powered up, because when you turn it on, this thing's got a self-center. So leave that off until everything's turned on, and then you can connect up the steering. Okay, we're getting there, guys. Now we're on to wheels and tires. These are the wheels that I went with. I had these tires for the 4Runner. They're a little bit smaller than the ones that I put on it, but I got these kind of stiff, but for what this thing will do, I think these will be just fine. They're a good sticky compound. Now for the wheels, these are a beadlock wheel. So what a beadlock means is that this ring right here pinches on the bead of the tire, holding the tire to the wheel, so that way it can stretch and flex and the tire won't slip off of the bead. So the way to put these together is you take back section off. There'll be bolts on the back side right there. You take those off and you take the center ring out, put this down. You're going to take the center ring, put it inside of the tire. It's a little tough, so you want it inside there, inside of the bead of the tire. So when you put the wheel together, it's going to pinch down on the bead, thus the bead lock. So you want that in there and centered. So now that is essentially done. And you're going to put this bag of bolts and put screws in every single one of these holes. And then the bolts for the hex on the back, do those. Okay, that is all done. As you can see, all the bolts are in, even the ones for the hex. So now you have to get it in the tire. The tires are directional. Make sure you put it in the direction that you want them to be. I don't know if these are. I guess they kind of are. Take this piece that you just used, and you're going to put it inside of the tire and push it down just like that. Now this piece you have to get back here, and you have to push it down and connect it with the screws. Now they make a tool specifically for pressing these together so that you don't strip the bolts or anything like that. I have never used one, and I have really honestly never had an issue. I just squeeze it and it gets close enough, and you start one bolt Then you start 2 bolts. And as you, I don't know if you saw in the time lapse, but I do everything in a star pattern. So I just kept going back and forth. I didn't just do straight in a circle just like that. I do that because I put real beadlocks together, and that's how you do it so you don't warp the wheel. Does that do it on an RC wheel? I have no idea, but it's habit, so that's just how I do it. You get a bolt, get it started in there, press with your fingers on this side, the bolt on the other side, press it until you can get it started, and there you go. Now, some tires are trickier than others. It all depends on the width of the wheel, obviously. So don't think that they're all going to be that easy. I have had to fight a couple of them before.
This is Waffles RC coming in.
Please hold. So once you press it together, you get 2 on opposite sides of it. You get 1 started, and you get 1 directly across from it. Squeeze it together, get it started, and then put the other 4 in and slowly tighten them up in an even star pattern, because that will warp, I'm pretty sure. So that is a complete wheel. Now I just have to do this 3 more times. So I'll save you the time, and you'll see it on the truck when it's all ready and done. These aftermarket axles come with this lock nut and a washer. I would highly suggest not using them. That washer always bends. The lock nut will come loose. The wheel will come off. I'll put in the description below as well for these flange lock nuts. They work very well. That's why you'll look at most of the other RCs and they pretty much all have this style nut on them. And there we are. RC all put together. I did just put the receiver on. So let's plug a battery into this thing. Got the remote ready to go. So I just have to bind all of this to the remote and see what happens. All right, so a battery would help just a little bit. This down here. It's not going to drive anywhere. So remember, with the Fly Sky stuff, you have to push the little button in here as you turn it on, or while you're turning it on, to bind it to the remote. And it works. Disconnect the battery to be smart and safe about things. There you go. Running, not driving, because we need drive shafts. So let me put the drive shafts in and then we'll move this thing about. That's reversed. Oh! Okay, let's just stop that right there. Alright. Proof that nobody's perfect. When you're trying to make your vehicle go forwards and backwards, it helps if you put the drive shafts on the same output, so that way the front isn't trying to go backwards while the back is trying to go forwards. So let me fix that real quick and then we'll try this again. The steering was backwards, so I got to change that, set the end points, but this is a little more important. All right, take 2. Oh, helps turn that on. Okay. That is backwards as well. Got this all set up how I want it. So now I just have to put this battery tray somewhere like this, maybe. I think it'll fit inside the body. Does this fit inside here? Yes, it does. So, good thing about these sliders is that they have all these holes. So if you have the kit with the spacers like this, then all I have to do is get a bunch of spacers, some long bolts, run it up through here, tighten it all up, then battery tray is set right there where it needs to be. There is a battery tray. Is it pretty? No. will it work? I sure hope so, honestly. The last step of assembling the actual RC itself is getting all these wires tucked up out of the way, get some double-sided tape for the receiver and for the power switch, and get those mounted on to these plates right here, and then put the body posts in. So in one evening, there is a driving RC. Put the body mounts in, as you can see. So now, from this point, now that you have your chassis all built, it comes down to what body do you want to put on this frame. You can put anything you want. As you can see, in the crawler world, there's lots of Jeeps, trucks, Toyotas. There are a few people out there that do something different, but for the most part, you see a lot of kind of the same thing, but there are a lot of variations out there. But in the case of the Escalade, that is a racer or a drifter, it's not a crawler body. So now that you've built your chassis, go find a body. Now you have to make sure that whichever body you pick has the right wheelbase. You can adjust these a little bit. You can get longer links for the rear. That'll make it stretch a bit more, get you to the 324 millimeter. But you want to find something that's close. Now the one that I chose for this one, I think is awesome, hilarious, and guaranteed it's going to be different. My wife only agrees with a third one. I have a feeling that you guys are going to think it's funny and awesome all at the same time, because it's really going to prove you can do whatever you want with these things. So for me, it'll be tomorrow morning, but for you, you're going to see the body that I chose to put on this frame. So I'll see you in a second. I think it's time to bring some class back into rock crawling RCs. And there you have it, guys. That right there just goes to show anybody can be on one of these frames. Found this online on A-Main. It was, for some reason, like a road racer body. Obviously, had to make the wheel wells a little bit larger, cut out some of the bumper, and it still rubs pretty bad. We got sliders and a Mercedes body rock crawler with functioning lights on the front and on the rear. But man, I think this is just awesome. You can have all your trucks that you want, and they are fun and they do look good, but who wouldn't want a redneck off-road Mercedes-Benz? Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. Hope you all learned something about how to put one of these together just with random aftermarket parts and whatever random body you can think of to put onto one of these. I had a lot of fun building it. I think it took me a total, with filming, 5 hours to have this thing completely done. It's really not that hard as long as you get all the parts. Once again, I will put all the links for all the parts that I used, including the body, which was expensive, but I mean, look at it. It was worth it. And it wasn't that much more than any other body. It came painted, so I did not paint it, neither did my wife or Anna. Just, it was painted already. And I get to say now that I own a Mercedes, and it's not a G-Wagon like everybody else has. We have an SEL Mercedes, which is why I'm still wearing the tie, and my neck is sweating because of it. And I lost the shirt because I basically turned that into a puddle. So, from Waffles RC, thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Get out there, have some fun, be creative, be different. See you next week.